Hi everybody, so we are back talking about writing a persuasive argument. Last time we talked about the first two parts of an argument. The first part is your claim. That is a sentence that shows your overall point of view. It shows what your position will be. And then we also talked about reasons, which are the statements of logic that you're going to explore in your essay. So the pieces of support for your claim. And now we're going to talk about proving that claim and reasons using evidence, which is our third part. So evidence, if you look at the picture here, meta-analysis, reviews, trials, case studies, these are some things that are usually used in upper level classes. So if you take a science class, where you're talking about, let's say, one of our other examples today is juvenile offenders and how their brains aren't developed. But let's say when you're taking a biology class or a psychology class, they're talking specifically about what that means. What does it mean that your brain doesn't develop until age 25? Well, they'll look at studies, they'll look at research papers from peer-reviewed sources, which we talked about in another video. And those can be used as pieces of evidence. Now, here they have YouTube videos. It's not scientific evidence, but it could be used as evidence. Personal anecdotes can sometimes be used as evidence, not gut feelings, parental instincts, some guy you know, right? Websites that are a little bit more sketchy. If you watch later on, if you read later on the using the CRAP test, the CRAP test for websites. So these are things that are scientific evidence. Sometimes you can use scientific evidence in your research, but we're going to talk about other pieces of evidence you can use as well for an argument. So, what is evidence? You need evidence to prove your reasons. Evidence can be found in the essays that you were assigned for the short argument and later on through your research for the longer argument that you're going to be writing for this class. I would like you to have one piece of evidence per paragraph. One. This can be a summary, a paraphrase, an anecdote, a fact, or a statistic. Another type of evidence is an example, sometimes a quotation from an expert, a research study, as we saw on the other slide, anything like that. Basically, these are your pieces of research, and we talked a lot before about the PEL method. This is giving evidence, and a little bit different than just for your informative essay, because you want to pick pieces of evidence that really connect to your argument, things that help to prove your reasons. And we'll talk about how to have a claim and then reasons and then use pieces of evidence. After giving evidence, you have to explain it, and then you link that evidence to your next point. The picture I have up there is just some examples of evidence for people when they're arguing about smoking. So let's say I say people should not be allowed to smoke. That's my claim, because smoking clogs your arteries. That's one of my reasons. Clogged arteries can lead to angina, shortness of breath, excessive sweating, male pattern baldness, erectile dysfunction, and heart palpitations, and possibly also heart attacks later on, right? So that would be a piece of evidence, some facts about clogged arteries that I could use as evidence to prove my claim. So here's some evidence examples. Juvenile offenders who commit murder should not be tried as adults. That's my claim. Juvenile offenders should not be tried as adults. My reason here is because children's brains are not fully developed. That is a piece of logic. It's a logical statement. Now, I could back that up with all different kinds of evidence. We talked before about using pathos and having emotional appeals. I could have an emotional piece of evidence. I could give an example of someone who accidentally committed a murder when they were 12 and then they were prosecuted and put in jail and all the hardships they went through because they were with adults, right? I could also talk about ethos. I could show you that the researchers who have done this are of good character and they have the authority to know what they're talking about. So it doesn't just because this is a logical statement, doesn't mean that I have to follow it up with a piece of logical evidence. It can be emotional, it can be an appeal to character or ethics, or it could be logos, it could be logical. So let's see what this essay picked. Here's some examples. They could have a paraphrase. Children's brains are not fully developed. The rational part of a teen's brain isn't fully developed and won't be until the age of 25. I left out the word age there. Sorry, guys. And then there's citation. The paraphrase is a piece of evidence from the AMA, the American Medical Association, that backs up the idea that I have here in my reason that kids' brains are not fully developed. Quotation. Neuroscientist Peter Green explains, quote, in fact, recent research has found that adult and teen brains work differently. Adults think with the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational part, etc., etc. So here I have an expert. He's a neuroscientist. He knows how brains work. Adult and teen brains work differently. And then he talks about the science using the amygdala and not being aware of long-term consequences. Again, this directly relates to this. Now, in my explanation of either one of these, I would have to connect it back to the claim and show why, because teens process information with their amygdala, they should not be tried as adults, right? It's not clear just from my evidence how it connects to my argument. And that's where the explanation comes in. Another piece of evidence, here's an example. Tina Farelli was a 13-year-old girl who drank alcohol, stole a car, and drove the car while drunk. While driving, she struck and killed an elderly man named Tim Turner. Farelli may have been tried as an adult, but her attorney claimed she was acting impulsively and was not mature enough to understand her actions. Then I have the citation for that as well. So again, this one connects a little bit more clearly to the claim, but I don't have an explanation. So it's a great piece of evidence, but if I don't explain it, my reader's not going to be persuaded because maybe they interpret it differently. Maybe they say, well, Tina Farelli shouldn't have been drinking as a 13-year-old. Who the hell gave her a car? How'd she even get the car keys? If I can show instead how she was acting impulsively because of her brain not being developed, then I can try to convince my audience that she should not have been tried as an adult. Here's more evidence examples. Claim, SeaWorld needs to be closed down. My reason was the organization has a history of cruelty to animals. So let's see what pieces of evidence we could find for this. Here's a fact. 3 killer whales have died at the San Diego SeaWorld Park since 2014. I don't have a citation there, so I'm not sure how accurate that fact is, but you could look it up maybe. Expert Jerry Bryant, a former trainer at SeaWorld, claims that some of the animals are in constant pain. He writes, quote, orcas have perpetual sunburns which are shielded from the public eye with the help of black zinc oxide, which matches their skin. So this is a really good example of cruelty to animals, and it's from an expert. If I explain here in my explanation later on, I can connect it to my claim that SeaWorld needs to be closed down. So I might say something like, this is having the orcas in tanks and allowing them to be so close to the sun is just one example of cruelty to animals. These animals are in constant pain, and this is one of the many reasons SeaWorld needs to be shut down, right? Here is a summary. An article from USA Today described the practices of obtaining animals for SeaWorld exhibits. Don Goldsberry, who worked for SeaWorld, was assigned to bring the orcas into the park, slaughtered animals he could not catch. The article describes how Goldsberry hired divers to slit open the bellies of 4 orcas, fill them with rocks, and put anchors in their tails and sink them to the bottom of the ocean so their deaths could not be discovered. The person who actually wrote this essay then went on to kind of explain this summary in a little bit more detail. So talking about how SeaWorld not only needs to be closed down because of their exhibits, but he also said that SeaWorld should in part be closed down because of the kidnapping of animals and the cruelty to animals even outside the park gates. So here's an example of an explanation. The claim before, if you remember, they should not be tried as adults because their brains are not fully developed. The evidence I just took here, the paraphrase, the rational part of a teen's brain isn't fully developed. So here's the explanation. Since an adolescent's brain does not fully mature until later in life, many experts have connected juvenile crimes with immaturity and impulsivity. Children cannot be fully responsible for their actions if they do not completely comprehend the severity of the crimes they are committing. Now, I've explained for my audience how this paraphrase relates directly to my claim. So the explanation helps to kind of connect all 3 of these pieces together. Now I have a really nice paragraph. Here is another example. It's Gwyneth Paltrow smoking and trying to look cool while smoking. People should be allowed to smoke. Smoking is good for your weight. This was from a student paper I had. So this was a claim, and this was one of the reasons. Here was the topic sentence for one of her body paragraphs. The nicotine in tobacco smoke is a powerful appetite suppressant. Evidence. Tobacco companies caught on by the 1920s and began targeting women with the lure that smoking could make them thinner. Today, models and actors smoke to keep their weight down. This is a fact, and it's a historical fact, so it's kind of interesting. She also had here a quotation, and I kind of think that it would have been a little bit better maybe to explain this, just even in a sentence, to connect it to the next piece of evidence. So that's just something to think about. If you limit your paragraph to one piece of evidence, sometimes it's a little bit more clear. According to a study published in the July 2017 issue of Journal of Physiology and Behavior, inevitable weight gain upon quitting smoking is a major barrier getting people to stop, second only to addiction. A study found as an appetite suppressant, nicotine appears to act on part of the brain called the hypothalamus, causing mice to snack less. Now, what's interesting to me was how the student decided to use this evidence, because you could say, instead of diet and exercise, tobacco companies are manipulating people to try to get them to lose weight by using tobacco, which harms their body in other ways. But instead, she went in a different direction. So here's tying it back to the claim. While most doctors would not recommend smoking for weight control, obese people could use cigarettes for a short period of time to control their appetites. With all the dangers that come with obesity and obesity-related illnesses, many are willing to do anything to improve their health. This is just one reason people should be allowed to smoke. And then she kind of linked it to her next point, and she said another reason, and then she kind of went on from there. So it's interesting, and I wish, the only thing that I marked her down on here was that I wish that she had talked a little bit more about a short period of time. If she could have explained in her argument and her analysis of the evidence, what does a short period of time mean? What are the short-term health detriments to smoking for a short period of time? Would there be any blowback once people stopped smoking? Would they gain the weight back? Those are some kind of things that came up. But you can see how she analyzed the evidence to support her claim, and her reason was she tried to prove her reason with that evidence. So here's an example of a body paragraph, what to do. We looked last time at the essay from bullying, and this is another paragraph from it. I think I deleted some words here. Sorry about that. One of the most prevalent causes of bullying that has been established is the pure feeling of powerlessness in an individual's life. So this is really her topic sentence. This is the P part, her point. This was one of the reasons from her claim. Powerlessness. By victimizing others, bullies are usually claiming power in their lives. The reasons behind this are varied. For a child, that feeling may be caused by having certain problems in their homes. The parents may be violent, going through divorce, or a family member may be an addict. Children react by victimizing their peers to feel powerful. What's nice about this piece of evidence is that she has a really good balance of her words and ideas from the text. So this part she has cited, which was a paraphrase. And then she has her explanation before linking it. I don't want to just leave P on there. Both children and adults find pleasure in subduing others. They're usually very impulsive. Oh, both child and adult bullies. Yes, that makes more sense. Both children and adult bullies find pleasure in subduing others. They are very impulsive and feel happy when they see their victims feeling helpless. In a way, they think they can replace the situation they are experiencing at home by ruling others outside the home. So she explains this piece of evidence in a really nice way and ties it back to the feeling of powerlessness in an individual's life. So kind of rephrasing that pleasure in subduing others. And then she linked it to her next point. So here's what not to do. This is from the essay we were looking at earlier about gambling addiction. According to an article about gambling addiction by the APA, gambling addiction and alcohol addiction have similar effects on a person's personality. What is Gambling Disorder states that people with gambling disorder often hide their behavior by lying to family members, etc. So I don't want to read the whole thing because I want to break it down. What went wrong here? Well, this actually isn't a bad way to start, except that the citation's wrong. And then we have this, and then we have this. If you notice, when I break it down into bullet points, what do we have here? That's one quote. That's a second quote. And that's a third quote. So this is a great, or horrible rather, example of quotations being strung together. There's a transition, there's no interpretation, and then when we transition to the next point, there's nothing there to connect the ideas together. Also, the citations are not done correctly. The only thing he did well here is he did have quotation marks around the article title, which was good. So then he had the next transition. Not only does it affect a person's personality, but it can also affect their life. The other thing, too, is that he has this idea about personality, and then he has lying, but I don't know really that, well, it's hard to fully make the connection outside of just hiding behavior or lying. So here's the paragraph revised. I know what I was going to say. Sorry. Sorry. So here's the paragraph revised. Gambling and alcohol have similar effects on an addict's brain. Now, this connected directly to one of his reasons, and it's a great topic sentence, or the P rather, for his point. Like alcoholics, gambling addicts' brains are affected by dopamine, according to Nathan DeCandis of the American Psychological Association. And then we have the quote, and then we have it cited. So that's nice. We have the evidence. This means that like an alcoholic who drinks more and more to feel good, a gambling addict will spend more and more money to get a high. When they win money, their brains are rewarded. The problem is that although New York State has increased the number of casinos that are legal, they have not increased education about gambling addiction, so many people are unaware that gambling can be as dangerous as a drug. What's nice about his explanation here now is that here we explain the quote, and here we have some analysis. So it ties it back to his thesis or back to his claim. I started writing thesis and claim at the same time. Sorry. Both kind of mean the same thing. Then he has his link part. For example, not only does compulsive gambling affect a person's brain, but it can also affect their personality. Then, when he talked about personality, he had a really much more clear point about addictive behavior with lying and hiding and personality changes. So here he changed his point, but he really laid it out quite a bit more clearly and connected it back to his claim. So it was a lot more persuasive. So concluding, how do you do a conclusion at the end of all of these persuasive paragraphs? You can the beginning where I talk about thesis statements, I talk about an inverted pyramid. You can do a regular pyramid here where you restate the main premise, you summarize the key points of your essay, and then you make a broad statement like a recommendation or show how it kind of affects people at large. New words, not new ideas, and summarize your reasons. You can do that for some of your persuasive essays. If you have a very long essay, it's kind of nice to summarize all of your points. But what I would like you to do for this essay is show your audience why the topic is important and why they should care, or kick them into action, meaning directly ask them to do something about the issue you are discussing. So there's another lecture video about conclusions and a little bit more clear on how to do this that I would like you to watch before you go and write. But for now, that is it. Look forward to reading your work.